Okay, we're back. This is Josh Jalinski talking to Professor Taylor, Dr. Taylor of Columbia University about the breakdown of market society. So Bitcoin is sort of the decentralization of money. Number one, how does Bitcoin continue to grow? It reached, I don't know, a size, I think 48,000 this week. How does Bitcoin, but Bitcoin almost seems like a searching for meaning. People don't understand even what it is, but because their God is materialism, they just want to make money quick, and they think everyone's going to assign meaning to it. And maybe that's where meaning is assigned. Do you think the rise of Bitcoin will continue? Question number one. And what happens when the government starts to regulate it? Now, there's Bitcoin bulls that say, oh, the government can't. Well, the government could kind of do whatever they want. They could regulate the wallets. They could enforce anybody to have a Bitcoin wallet system, and they assign like some type of value, kind of value-added tax on the Bitcoin wallet. There's a lot of ways for it to be regulated. So those two questions, what do you think, Dr. Taylor?
So let's look at Bitcoin in a bit broader context. The way you describe it is right. I see it as a culmination of a process that is tied to a new technological infrastructure of these first local and then global networks. What has happened over the course of the last 40 or 50 years is a process of what we could call a dematerialization or a virtualization of currencies of exchange. In the beginning, people exchanged things. They then exchanged paper currency that was supposed to be grounded in precious metals, which are supposed to have intrinsic value. As I said a few minutes ago, then gold disappeared and they exchanged paper not backed by anything else. Paper became digitized and became increasingly dematerial. I often will say to my students, the question is not so much what money is, but where money is. What does it become? What do the tokens of exchange become in a networked world? If you look at Bitcoin, right? The logo for Bitcoin is the digital image of a gold coin superimposed upon a B as a dollar sign, right? It's backed by nothing. When you look at what has happened to markets more broadly, right? In these markets now, look at the difference between the Dow the Dow at 31,000 today, when the so-called real economy is suffering enormously. As you know better than I, 70% of the trades on the New York Stock Exchange are algorithmic, and what is being traded in those markets has virtually nothing to do with the value of the companies or whatever it is that they represent. The exchanges are made at super high speed, often in nanoseconds. The only basis of the exchange being the price differential in different investments. The systems doing the trading don't even know what it is that they're trading. So we've had this complete virtualization of the economy, of the financial system, decoupled from any relationship to any kind of real value. So there's been a fundamental shift in the way in which value is established. Economic value, but we can see similar patterns going on in in ethical and even religious value as well. I disagree that the problem is that we have to go back to some kind of notion of God, because I think competing notions of God have gotten us into this morass that we're in. I mean, God takes many forms, and often will lead to different interpretations of God will lead to conflict as often as it will lead, as the different views will lead to any kind of harmony or integration. And part of the problem is that the very networks that have enabled this new financial system to emerge have also created this new have also created this new these social networks. And paradoxically, the more connected we become, the more divided we become. So we're all within these filter bubbles, right? Competing with each other, living in different realities with different gods that cannot be reconciled.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. I think if you go back to the old Dutch Reformed theologians, it's been a while since I was in my theology classes, so forgive me. We need an external source of knowing. Does that make sense? If right now people are knowing, their whole sense of knowledge, their epistemology, their foundation of knowing is based on either themselves, what they assign meaning, or on materialism. So the end product now is this social media sort of oligarchy, where all of these big tech companies are now assigning meaning. And the end result will be, and this death of God movement that happened in the 60s also happened, in a way, there's a parallel with Nietzsche and what went on, 100 years before in even Germany, where once you have no meaning, then the government starts to assign meaning. And then science
I think
assigns meaning. And then now you have all these people seeking some type of normative or a norming norm where they get to evaluate and critique you. So it's this kind of weird pseudo religion that we're seeing now, where people are exalting science, and a fascinating discussion. So Bitcoin, do you see, so kind of we're going to move on more financial thing. Do you see Bitcoin as keeping its rise in a sense? Or do you see all these other cryptos and each sort of with their own god, So I have this one guy who's texting me, Algo, Doge. There are a ton of, I've got a buddy of mine, he's texting me today. You got the Akash network, Tixel, Polkadot, Kusama,
right?
XRP, you got Ethereum, you got Bitcoin, you got ADA.
Right.
You have all of these odd Bitcoin replacements now because people are trying to get rich on a new norm. Or will Bitcoin be that norm and it'll go up to 100,000? I mean, nobody predicts the future, but what's your prediction?
Well, look, when it comes to finance, I do philosophy. When it comes to financial prediction, I'm going to, you know a lot more about that than I do. Two things I want to say. What I will say is that I think you're right, pointing to this proliferation of these, I don't know what we call them, cryptocurrencies in that way. I don't think there's going to be an end to that. I think that will continue. I also think eventually it's all going to collapse. I think that it is unsustainable in its current state at its current rate. But I also want to go back to a point that you brushed over quickly, which I think is fascinating. And you invoked sort of Dutch Calvinists in all this. Do you know who the first person was to use the image of the invisible hand?
No.
John Calvin. And for John Calvin, the invisible hand was God's providence. The one usually associated with
is Adam Smith, yeah.
Is Adam Smith. Well, all those early political theorists were Scots, and Scots are Calvinists, right? What Smith did, in effect, was to appropriate Calvin's notion of God as omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient as a way of understanding the market. And the market came to govern economic exchange as God had governed the world in that way. So there's an internalization, as it were, of this invisible hand, that it now becomes part of that system. I do not think there is any external ground or foundation or whatever to meaning and value outside of the networks of exchange, social, technological, religious, moral, ethical, economic, right? We are imbricated in a network that has no externality to it. There are ways you can interpret this in relationship to the meaning and value that traditionally had been found in various religions, but I don't think there is an external ground any more than I think gold had an intrinsic meaning or value. Nothing has intrinsic value. It's valuable.
Well, I think that's precisely why there's
we give it value.
So much destruction, because now there is no external foundation. It's just the internal. I mean, this is a debate.
But destruction, but also creation.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Taylor. I don't hear you now. Speak again. Make your point.
You hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. There's destruction, to be sure, but there's also creation in all that. I mean, creation and destruction are always bound up with each other. But I don't think that any external, whatever that would mean, what would it mean for there to be something external? I don't think that solves the problem. I mean, I think the problem, I think the problem is the interrelationship of competing agents and agencies, right? Within the world, part of the problem, and you have not only the dematerialization and decentralization of currencies, you have the deregulation of it, and the destabilization that you're talking about. But these networks of exchange now are denationalized; they're global, and if there is going to be any kind of regulation, however that would take place, you're going to have global agencies for global problems. Just as with climate. I mean, you can't solve these problems, these currency or exchange problems nationally when you have a global economy that has been facilitated by a new infrastructure, a new technological networked infrastructure that changes everything. It changes everything.
Well, we'll be back. We'll be back after these messages. Dr. Taylor talking about religion, money markets, Bitcoin, and the next segment we'll talk about education. And so Dr. Taylor prophesied what's going on in education years ago, and we'll talk about that, and his new theories of what's going to happen with education. When we return, this is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback. Don't touch that dial.
The preceding program was sponsored by the Jalinski Advisory Group. Any awards, rankings, or recognition by unaffiliated third parties or publications, including 5-Star Wealth Manager, Advisory of the Year finalist by Senior Market Advisor, and Top of the $1 Million Roundtable, are in no way indicative of the advisor's future performance or any individual client's investment success. No award, ranking, or recognition should be construed as a current or past endorsement of Josh Jalinski or Wealth Quarterback LLC. Information regarding specific awards, rankings, or recognitions is available on the Wealth Quarterback website at www.jalinski.org. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. Investment strategies such as asset allocation, diversification, or rebalancing do not assure or guarantee better performance and cannot eliminate the risk of investment losses. There are no guarantees that a portfolio employing these or any other strategy will outperform a portfolio that does not engage in such strategies. This broadcast should not be construed by any client or prospective client as a solicitation to effect or attempt to effect transactions in securities or the rendering of personalized investment advice. Due to various factors, including changing market conditions, the information discussed in this broadcast may no longer be reflective of current positions or recommendations. While information presented is believed to be factual and up to date, Josh Jalinski and Wealth Quarterback do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. The tax and estate planning information discussed is general in nature, is provided for informational purposes only, and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Listeners should consult an attorney or tax professional regarding their specific legal or tax situation. Advisory services offered through Wealth Quarterback LLC.